The American West is full of mysterious places. Landscapes that feel less like scenery and more like riddles. Some are wrapped in legends, places where spirits are said to move through the stones or where the land itself hums with energy. Others are purely visual puzzles, shaped by geology into forms so bizarre they look like an alien world. And then there are the ones tied to history. Sites where ancient people left marks we still don't understand. Or where entire civilizations vanished, leaving only questions carved into rock. Out here, the boundary between the natural and the supernatural blurs. The earth itself becomes a storyteller, and the stories aren't always easy to explain. And one of those places that doesn't seem real until you're standing in it is the racetrack playa. Heavy rocks, some weighing hundreds of pounds, somehow move across the desert surface, leaving long trails etched in the clay. Locals told about magnetic forces, mischievous spirits, or even aliens. Scientists argued came up with theories, none of which fully explained what people were seeing. The truth, when it finally came, turned out to be just as fascinating as the mystery. On rare winter nights, when rain falls, the playa becomes a shallow sheet of water. As temperatures drop, the water freezes and thin sheets of ice form around the rocks. When the morning sun warms the ice, gentle breezes nudge the rocks across the slick surface. The movements are so subtle you'd never see them in real time. But given hours, days, weeks, the rocks trace their long journeys across the desert floor. And yet, even with an explanation, the racetrack playa doesn't lose its magic. If anything, it becomes more extraordinary. East of Phoenix, where the city sprawl begins to thin out, the Superstition Mountains rise. For centuries, stories have clung to these rocks. The Apache called them sacred, a place of spirits. When early settlers arrived, they brought their own legends and their greed. That's where the tale of the Lost Dutchman mine comes in. In the late 1800s, a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, the Dutchman, though he wasn't Dutch at all, supposedly discovered a rich gold vein. Before his death, Waltz hinted at its location. Since then, treasure hunters have scoured the superstitions. Some vanished. Others came back empty-handed, but with wild tales of shadowy figures and strange lights. And then there's the danger. These mountains are unforgiving. Summer heat climbs past 110 degrees. Water sources vanish. Every year, search and rescue teams are called in to find those who push too far. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes don't. Drive east across the Sierra Nevada and eventually the mountains open into a high desert basin. Mono Lake, vast, still, and strange. The first thing you notice is the colour. The water shimmers a kind of ghostly green. Then there's the smell, sharp, mineral. Mono Lake is 3 times saltier than the ocean and alkaline enough to sting your skin. And then there are the towers. Rising from the shoreline are strange, knotted spires of rock called tufa. They look man-made, like the ruins of some ancient city. But they're not. They're limestone, built slowly underwater as freshwater springs mixed with a salty lake. When the lake's level dropped in the 20th century, drained by thirsty cities like Los Angeles, these formations were exposed. The ecosystem teetered on collapse. It took decades of activism and lawsuits by locals and scientists to slow the damage. Today, the lake is protected, but it still hasn't fully recovered. Northern New Mexico, high desert, wide skies, mesas stretching to the horizon. Out here, in what looks like the middle of nowhere, lies one of the most mysterious places in the American Southwest. Chaco Canyon. At first glance, it doesn't make sense. You're surrounded by scrub and dust. Yet scattered across this canyon floor are the remains of monumental stone cities. Not villages, not camps, cities. Massive complexes of stone and timber, some 5 stories tall, with hundreds of rooms. The most famous of these is Pueblo Bonito. From above, it's a D-shaped masterpiece, perfectly aligned with the sun and the moon. Archaeologists say thousands of people lived here. Chaco was a center of culture, power, and knowledge. But knowledge of what? Because the alignment is too precise to be coincidence. Windows line up with solstices. Walls catch the light of lunar standstills. events so rare they occur only once every 18 years. Whoever built Chaco didn't just know the stars, they built their world around them. And we still don't know why. Where Chaco sprawls across the desert floor, Mesa Verde clings to the cliffs. Two worlds, connected by the same story, but told in very different voices. Here in the high desert of Colorado, the ancestral Puebloans didn't just build houses. They carved entire neighborhoods into the canyon walls. Multi-story dwellings tucked into natural alcoves, hidden hundreds of feet above the ground. Cliff Palace alone has over 150 rooms. From below, the structures blend into the rock. Like the mountain itself decided to grow a village. Why here? Why up in the cliffs? Archaeologists point to defense or climate. The stone offering shade in summer, insulation in winter. Like Chaco, Mesa Verde carries its mystery. By the late 1200s, the people here were gone. Thousands vanished from the cliffs. Drought, conflict, shifting beliefs, all theories. The modern Pueblos say it wasn't disappearance at all. It was migration. They didn't abandon Mesa Verde. They carried it with them. Leaving behind the sun calendars of the ancestral Pueblans, we venture west into Utah's desert. The canyons widen and then, without warning, you stumble onto something that feels like a fever dream. Goblin Valley. The name fits. Thousands of stone figures crowd a shallow valley. Some squat and round, others stretch tall, balancing impossible caps of sandstone. They look like mushrooms, trolls, strange creatures from a world that shouldn't exist. Yet geologists explain it neatly. These are hoodoos. The softer Entrada sandstone wears away quickly, leaving behind strange shapes. Just erosion at work, no different than anywhere else in the desert. But Goblin Valley doesn't feel random, it feels staged. Like nature is telling a joke only it understands. For centuries, this place was almost unknown. Local ranchers kept it secret. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that Goblin Valley became a state park. Even now, compared to Utah's big-name parks, it's quiet. And at the Bisti Danazin Wilderness, The hoodoos don't look like goblins, they look like bones. Winged rocks balance on narrow spines. Petrified logs lie scattered. Towers slump into grotesque shapes, some animal, some human. It's less a playground, more a mausoleum. Scientists call it erosion. The Navajo call it sacred. Both are true. 70 million years ago, none of this was desert. It was a swamp along the shores of an inland sea. Dinosaurs stalked through the ferns. When they died, the mud held their bones. Now, the Badlands give them back, piece by piece. Paleontologists have unearthed new species of dinosaurs here. What looks like wasteland is, in fact, one of the richest fossil beds in the southwest. Some landscapes announce themselves with scale. Grand Canyon, Monument Valley. Sedona is different, smaller, softer, but no less strange. The first thing you notice is the colour, those red rock buttes glowing like embers. And then there's the other thing, the claims. That Sedona isn't just beautiful, it's powerful. That scattered among its cliffs and canyons are vortexes, places where energy swirls. Now, depending on who you ask, that means different things. For the spiritual seekers, vortexes are sites of healing and transformation. For skeptics, it's tourist bait, new age marketing. Science, of course, offers other explanations. Iron-rich rock interacting with magnetic fields. Geology that tricks the senses. Maybe it's all in our heads. But does that make it less real? Some mountains dominate because of height, others because of beauty. Mount Shasta does both, but it also does something harder to define. Even from the highway, Shasta feels impossible. A single snow-capped cone, nearly 15,000 feet tall, shooting straight up out of forests. To many, it's alive. Stories place it at the center of creation, the dwelling place of spirits, a bridge between worlds. Ask the spiritual seekers, and they'll tell you Shasta is a beacon. A place where meditation deepens. Some believe Shasta hides a lost civilization, Lemuria. A mythical continent said to have sunk beneath the Pacific. Supposedly, survivors fled underground, building vast crystal cities beneath the mountain. People come here for all kinds of reasons. Climbers chasing the summit, mystics chasing energy. And somehow, Shasta holds them all. "90 miles to the south, Lassen Peak reminds you that the Earth doesn't care about your stories. At first glance, it looks solid, immovable, but this peak has a temper. In 1914, it woke up. For 2 years, Lassen belched steam, ash, and lava, culminating in a violent eruption in 1915 that sent a mushroom cloud soaring 30,000 feet into the sky. Villages were buried in mud flows, forests flattened. For a while, Lassen looked like America's own Mount Vesuvius. Today, the mountain seems calm. Snowfields glisten on its slopes. But wander deeper into Lassen Volcanic National Park, and the illusion cracks. The ground hisses, mud pots bubble, sulfur fumes rise from steaming vents. Places with names like Bumpass Hell remind you that you're walking on a crust, barely holding back a boiling world. Lassen doesn't have Shasta's myths. What it has is honesty. This mountain doesn't pretend. It shows you exactly what it is. A volcano, restless and alive. Everyone who stands at the foot of Devil's Tower in Wyoming asks the same question. What exactly am I looking at? The monolith doesn't blend into the landscape. A single, perfect tower, as if planted here by something or someone. It's not a mountain, not in the usual sense. It's a massive column of volcanic rock, 1,200 feet tall. The sides etched with vertical grooves. Clean, precise, almost too precise. That's the thing. Geology explains the process, but not the feeling. Because standing here, it doesn't feel like erosion. It feels like intention. The native stories vary, but many speak of children chased by a giant bear. They pray to the Great Spirit who raised the ground beneath their feet. The bear clawed at the stone, leaving deep grooves. and the children became the stars of the Pleiades. Miles of rolling farmlands stretch across eastern Washington, soft golden hills that feel endless. And then, without warning, a deep canyon and a river that drops in a single furious plunge. Palouse Falls. It's one of those places that makes you stop and wonder, why here? There are no towering peaks feeding it, no alpine glacier above. A canyon that looks like it was carved overnight. And in a way, it was. As around 15,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, a wall of ice dammed the Clark Fork River in Montana. Behind it, a lake formed holding more water than all the Great Lakes combined. When the dam finally burst, the flood that followed was apocalyptic. A wall of water, hundreds of feet high, tore across eastern Washington. Palouse Falls is one of the last visible remnants of that event. The canyon, the plunge pool, the cliffs, they were carved in days, not centuries. Most lakes you stumble on. Crater Lake isn't like that. You don't stumble here, you climb. Through pines and pumice, up switchbacks that keep you wondering if it's even worth it. And then suddenly the world drops open. A circle of cliffs, a bowl of stone. And at its center, water so impossibly blue it almost hurts to look at. Crater Lake looks like something rendered by a computer. The saturation dial cranked too high. But that color, that electric, impossible blue, is nature. 7,000 years ago, this wasn't a bowl. It was a mountain, Mount Mazama, nearly as tall as Shasta. Then one day, it blew. The eruption was apocalyptic, 40 times stronger than Mount St. Helens. The summit collapsed in on itself, leaving behind a massive caldera. Over centuries, water filled the void, and what had been destruction became beauty. Crater Lake is proof that the Earth can tear itself apart and still leave behind something astonishing. From the blue silence of Crater Lake, head north, and the world changes again. Soon you're standing in a place that feels nothing like the American West at all, the Hoh Rainforest. The trees here don't grow, they tower. Sitka spruce, western hemlock, Douglas firs, stretching 300 feet into the air. and the sound, or rather, the lack of it. The Hoh is one of the quietest places in North America. The silence is so deep it becomes its own kind of noise. This is a rainforest. Not the Amazon, but a temperate rainforest fed by the relentless rains that pound the Olympic Peninsula. Up to 14 feet of precipitation a year. That's what makes everything here heavy with green. Moss carpets the ground, lichen spreads across bark. Fallen trees decay into nurse logs, sprouting entire new forests from their bodies. Death and life overlap here in ways that are impossible to untangle. Meanwhile, in Arizona, the Petrified Forest hasn't been alive for over 200 million years. What was lush became stark. At first glance, it doesn't even read as a forest. No towering pines, no shade, no canopy. Just desert stretching to the horizon. And scattered across it all, logs. Massive tree trunks, broken into segments, polished by time. You walk closer and the illusion shatters. These aren't wood, they're rock, solid, heavy as bone. The story is deep time. During the late Triassic, this was a swampy floodplain thick with conifers and ferns. When the trees fell, they were buried in sediment. Minerals seeped in, atom by atom, replacing the wood with quartz, chalcedony, amethyst. What was once alive turned to stone, perfectly preserved, cell for cell. Oregon's painted hills just don't look real. Bands of ochre, gold, black, and green ripple across the hillsides. It looks less like geology and more like a mural, a canvas the size of a valley. Each stripe is a chapter laid down over 30 million years. The reds are ancient soils, baked with iron. Yellows and golds trace back to long-lost meadows. Black streaks, ash, blown here from volcanoes that once tore open the Cascades. The Petrified Forest showed you wood turned to stone, the painted hills, the soil itself fossilized into color. Both are records, archives, but here the record isn't in chunks of quartz or logs polished by the desert sun. It's in broad strokes, whole hillsides turned into history books. The painted hills remind that the world we know is temporary. Entire eras can vanish and leave only color behind. A field of spires, hundreds of them, rise in the southern Mojave Desert like the ruins of some alien city. This is Trona Pinnacles. Towers, cones, scattered across a dry lake bed. The place looks less like California and more like another planet. But geology, as usual, has an explanation. These are tufa towers. We've already seen similar formations at Mono Lake. During the Pleistocene, this whole basin was part of a chain of massive inland seas that once covered the Mojave. Calcium-rich springs bubbled up from below, meeting carbonate-rich water in the lake, and minerals began to crystallize. When the lake dried, the spires remained stranded on the desert floor. The pinnacles cluster in groups, each with their own shapes. Some sharp, some rounded, some broken, collapsing into rubble. Together they feel like a city, but one built by time, not hands. The Trona Pinnacles don't have the mythology of Sedona's vortexes, but landscapes don't need myths to feel otherworldly. Valley of Fire, Nevada's oldest state park. The rock here tells two stories, one geological, one human. Geologically, it begins 150 million years ago, when this land was buried under shifting sand dunes. Over time, pressure fused the dunes into sandstone, and minerals like iron stained them a deep crimson. The park gets its name not from metaphor, but from reality. The place really does look like it's on fire. But the human story is just as compelling. For thousands of years, the ancestral Puebloans left their marks on the stone. Human figures, spirals, animals, and the unmistakable shape of an atlatl, a spear thrower, a tool that gave hunters greater power. Archaeologists debate their purpose. Were they maps? Spiritual symbols? The truth is, we don't fully know. What we do know is that they mattered enough for someone to take the time to carve them into the hardest canvas possible, stone. Tucked away in the Utah desert, Sego Canyon is a gallery of human expression that spans thousands of years. 3 distinct cultures left their marks here. The oldest belonged to the archaic barrier canyon style, dating back as far as 6000 BC. They're not simple carvings, they're visions. Tall, ghostly figures, sometimes 10 feet high, painted in red and ochre. Some with hollow eyes, others with no eyes at all. Many lack arms and legs, floating like spirits. Anthropologists theorize they might represent gods, ancestors, or beings seen in visions induced by ritual. Centuries later, the Fremont culture arrived. Their rock art is different, more grounded, more narrative. Petroglyphs of hunters with bows, of bighorn sheep, of human figures with trapezoidal bodies, all of it layered together on the same walls, like a conversation across millennia. Halfway up Cleopatra Hill, overlooking the Verde Valley, sits Jerome, a town that refuses to die. It was born out of copper. In the late 1800s, prospectors discovered rich deposits buried under the hill. Almost overnight, a camp became a boomtown. At its peak, Jerome had 15,000 people, miners, gamblers, and every kind of drifter who followed money and chaos. But such fortunes don't last forever. By the 1950s, the copper veins had run dry. The mines shut down and the town collapsed. Except it didn't vanish. Artists moved in during the 1960s and 70s, drawn by cheap rent and eerie beauty. They set up studios in abandoned buildings, painted murals on crumbling walls. The place reinvented itself as something stranger, part ghost town, part artist colony. Jerome isn't dead. It's something in between. Unlike the polished ghost towns packaged for tourists, it feels raw, messy and layered. In the desert along the Arizona-Utah border lies a surreal sandstone formation, the Wave. Getting here is a challenge. A permit system turns entry into a lottery, only a handful of people allowed in each day. From the trailhead, it's a long hike across slick rock and sand under a sun that doesn't forgive. And then, after hours of heat and silence, the canyon opens. The Wave reveals itself, and suddenly, the exhaustion doesn't matter. Common sandstone, but it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen. The rock is striped in bands of red, orange, and yellow, like layers of watercolor. The Wave is fragile, too fragile for crowds. That's why the lottery, the limits, the rules. And maybe that's for the best. Not everything should be easy to see. Some places should remain rare, waiting for the right people. From a distance, Shiprock looks like a fortress. Black dikes of volcanic rock radiate outward, like great stone fins. They're remnants of magma that once forced its way up through cracks in the earth, solidifying underground. What we see now is essentially the skeleton of an eruption, a volcanic plug revealed by erosion. But science is only part of the story. For the Diné, the Navajo people, Shiprock is sacred. According to oral tradition, it was once a great bird that carried the Navajo to safety during their migration. For this reason, climbing the mountain is forbidden, both to honor its spiritual power and because the cliff itself is unstable. Shiprock is one of those places that resists simplification. To scientists, it's a rare chance to see the anatomy of an ancient eruption. To the Diné, a sacred monument tied to stories of survival and the spirit world. At first, it feels like a mirage. Against the backdrop of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the great sand dunes look out of place. But they're no illusion. They cover more than 30 square miles. A restless ocean of sand piled at the foot of snow-capped peaks. Over thousands of years, winds sweeping across the San Luis Valley carried sand from ancient lakes. Trapped against the mountains, the sand had nowhere to go. It piled and grew. Climb them, and you feel the scale. Every step sinks, lungs straining in the thin air. The park sits at over 8,000 feet elevation. But when you crest a ridge, the view is staggering. Wave after wave of golden dunes rolling into the distance. The Great Sand Dunes are strange. They don't fit the postcard version of Colorado, but that's what makes them unforgettable. And in New Mexico, the desert has prepared another surprise. A sea of white, so blinding it looks like snow, but it's not. It's White Sands National Park, the largest gypsum dune field on Earth. Here, the sand isn't golden. It's pure white, made of gypsum crystals left behind by ancient seas. About 250 million years ago, this part of New Mexico was underwater. As the sea evaporated, minerals concentrated, leaving vast beds of gypsum. Unlike most sand, gypsum doesn't hold heat, so even in the peak of summer, the dunes stay cool. You can walk barefoot in the middle of the desert, a contradiction that feels almost magical. Thousands of years ago, Paleo-Indians crossed this basin, leaving footprints that were only recently discovered. Some date back 23,000 years, making them some of the oldest human tracks ever found in North America. Now you might think you've seen it all. Glowing sandstone, shifting dunes, sacred monoliths. But the desert has yet to play its last card. And we head down into southeastern Arizona, into the Chiricahua Mountains. Suddenly, you're surrounded by stone giants. Pinnacles, towers, balanced rocks teetering on impossible bases. A wonderland of stone, some lean, some huddled together in clusters like petrified crowds. The story began about 27 million years ago when the Turkey Creek volcano erupted with unimaginable force. Ash, pumice, and lava flowed across the land, welding into a thick layer of volcanic tuff. Time, rain, and wind carved it into towers and pinnacles. Chiricahua feels like discovery, a place where the desert reimagined itself again. Looking back, the West feels like a patchwork of mysteries. Some of these places are strange because of geology. Others because of history. And some because people have always felt something they couldn't explain. We're only visitors here, passing through landscapes that were ancient long before us. And will outlast us all. Thanks for watching till the end. See you soon.